The Friday night heat pressed heavy against Jacksonville's streets, sticky and suffocating, making the neon lights above the bars shimmer like liquid fire. Inside the rusty anchor, the air was thick with smoke, laughter, and the sharp tang of spilled beer. The place was packed, locals unwinding, soldiers fresh from base, college kids celebrating the weekend. In the corner, a Marine sat alone, a scowl etched deep across his chiseled face. His uniform had long been swapped for jeans and a black t-shirt, but the tension radiating from him screamed discipline hardened by war. He nursed a drink, swirling it in a glass so hard the ice clinked like warning bells. Across the room, a young woman laughed, her voice cutting through the cacophony. Her hair caught the neon glow in soft streaks of copper. She leaned back, letting a friend brush past her, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. A spilled drink, a careless stumble from a passing patron, sent droplets flying across the floor. The liquid landed squarely on the Marine's table. "Watch it, lady," the Marine barked, slamming his palm against the bar. His voice boomed, drawing stares from nearby patrons. The laughter died abruptly. The woman blinked, eyes widening for just a second before narrowing into focus. She wasn't just startled, she was assessing. Every muscle, every micro-expression of the man across from her told a story of anger, of someone used to control, someone dangerous when provoked. She took a step back, brushing the wetness from her jacket sleeve. "Here, you're the Marine's insult hung in the air like a thrown dagger. But before he could finish, the woman moved. Fast, controlled. Her hand shot out, catching his swinging fist midair, twisting it with a precision that made him grunt in surprise. The bar seemed to hold its breath. Gasps erupted. A couple of men froze in the middle of their argument. Drinks were forgotten, the music fading into a dull hum behind the collective tension. The Marine, strong and trained, felt himself off balance for the first time in years. He had fought in wars, close quarters, life and death, but never like this. This wasn't brute force, it was technique, control, anticipation. She wasn't just defending herself, she was asserting dominance. The bartender, frozen with a towel halfway to a counter, finally swallowed and cleared his throat. Maybe cool it down a little, folks." His voice trembled. The woman's eyes locked onto the Marine's, icy and unwavering. She spoke softly, but her words carried a lethal authority. "Back off, now." The Marine's jaw tightened, a mix of anger and disbelief flashing across his face. He had expected compliance, fear, maybe a stumble, but not this. Not confidence, not control, not someone who could read him in an instant, unafraid. A fellow Marine, seated at the same table, shouted, "Hey, you can't," but his words died on his lips. The woman's stance, her balance, her aura, it told him to stay silent. He did, realizing instantly that this wasn't a fight he wanted any part of. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered, "Is she a cop?" Another shook their head. No one could tell. The woman's calm, measured movements, the way she held her ground, the subtle, almost imperceptible glint of something under her jacket, it was unsettling. In that instant, the Marine's mind flashed back to training, to deployments, to moments in life-or-death situations overseas. He had been the predator. He had been the one in control. And yet here, in this noisy, smoke-filled bar, he felt exposed, vulnerable. Then she stepped back, releasing his arm with deliberate ease. The Marine stumbled slightly, trying to regain composure. His pride, his ego, burned hotter than the sticky heat of the bar. What are you?" he demanded, voice low, dangerous. The woman didn't answer. She adjusted her jacket slightly, covering what no one else could see. A badge, subtle, tucked beneath the fabric, etched with a name that would mean nothing to the average bar-goer, but everything to those in the know. Riley Hunter, Navy SEAL, undercover, observing, assessing, protecting. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to escalate. One look, one controlled movement, and the Marine was stopped. He clenched his fists, jaw working. "You don't know who you're messing with," he growled. But even as the words left his lips, he hesitated. There was a calculated calm about her, a precision in her eyes that betrayed experience he couldn't fake or train for. Around them, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Patrons sipped their drinks, some whispering, some staring, some wondering if a fight was about to break out or if this was some weird, staged act. The woman's eyes scanned the room quickly, nodding exits, nodding threats, nodding civilians who could be caught in the crossfire. Her awareness was a predator's instinct, honed over years in shadows. And still, she remained composed, almost casual, as if this was just another Tuesday. The Marine's fingers twitched. His heartbeat accelerated. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt fear. Not physical fear, but the kind that gnawed at pride, at ego, at control. He had trained soldiers. He had survived missions others wouldn't have dreamed of. Yet here, in a dimly lit bar, he realized he had underestimated someone far more capable than he could have imagined. A glass shattered somewhere near the jukebox, and both of them flinched slightly. The woman's gaze met his again, and in that second he saw clarity. She was not a civilian, not a tourist, not someone to provoke or intimidate. She was a professional, and he had stumbled into her world. The tension hung like smoke, thick and suffocating. No one moved. Every patron, every bartender, every friend and stranger in the bar sensed the invisible wire stretched taut between them. The Marine's pride, his instincts, his very identity were challenged in a single heartbeat. And then, without warning, she turned. Just a slight movement of her head, almost dismissive. She melted into the crowd with a fluidity that seemed impossible. The Marine lunged, but she was gone. Only the faint scent of her perfume lingered, mingling with spilled beer and cigarette smoke. The Marine sank onto the bar stool, heart racing, palms sweaty, bruises of ego forming faster than any physical injury could. A faint clink of metal caught his eye. A badge. No. He shook his head, convinced he had imagined it. But the memory lingered, the steel glint beneath the jacket, the control in her eyes, the calm authority that had stopped him cold. And in that moment, a whisper of dread settled in the pit of his stomach. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Whoever she was, whatever she represented, she had already changed the course of his night, and maybe his life. Suspense. Who was this woman, and why could she move with such precision? What had she seen in him that no one else had? And most importantly, was this chance encounter truly random, or had he walked straight into something far bigger than a bar fight? The bar had begun to settle, conversations trickling back into nervous laughter, the hum of the jukebox filling the uneasy silence. But the Marine couldn't relax. His fists still trembled slightly, not from pain but from disbelief. He had been trained for combat, had faced threats that would make most men freeze. But she, that woman, had disarmed him without raising her voice, without a single bruise. Her presence was a puzzle, a challenge to every instinct he thought he knew. He rubbed his jaw, tasting the sharp tang of blood from his lip, a consequence of his own momentum and failed strike. Anger and humiliation mingled into a dangerous brew. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered, low, more to himself than to anyone else. Across the bar, the woman, Riley Hunter, watched him with calm, calculated patience. Her laughter earlier, her playful demeanor, had vanished like mist in the wind. Now her eyes were sharp, scanning, anticipating. Her fingers flexed slightly at her sides, ready for any move he might make. Years of training were evident in her posture, her stance, the subtle weight shift that spoke of someone always prepared for violence and control. The Marine's friends began whispering, glancing nervously between the two. One of them, trying to reclaim dominance, stepped forward. "Hey, back off, she's..." "Stop!" The woman's voice cut through like a blade. Not loud, not aggressive, but it carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. The man froze, stepping back instinctively, hands raised in surrender. The Marine's eyes narrowed. His anger flared into action. He lunged forward again, faster this time, more desperate, hopping to catch her off guard. But Riley was already moving. She pivoted, a fluid, practiced motion, sidestepping his charge, then grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. A sharp yelp escaped him as he struggled to regain leverage. His muscles screamed, but her grip was like iron, unyielding, precise. Patrons gasped, some moving to the edges of the room. A glass of beer toppled, shattering on the floor. The Marine's fellow soldier tried to intervene, but Riley spun slightly, her other hand brushing against his shoulder in a calculated, disarming push. He stumbled forward, flailing, and hit the wall behind him with a thud. "Enough," she said, her tone low, dangerous, controlled. The Marine froze, a cold shiver running down his spine. He had been in firefights, in hand-to-hand combat, in life-or-death situations, but never had someone so small, so seemingly ordinary, moved with such lethal precision. The bartender, shaking, backed against the counter, his eyes darting from the Marine to the woman. He whispered under his breath, "Who is she?" Riley didn't answer. She never needed to. Her movement spoke louder than any words. She released the Marine, stepping back just enough to maintain control, to create a psychological advantage. Her chest rose and fell slowly, controlled, as if she were the calm in a storm, the eye around which chaos revolved. The Marine straightened, rubbing his arm where she had twisted it. Rage coursed through him, mixed with awe and confusion. He had been trained to dominate, to control, to survive. But she had outmaneuvered him without a single misstep. He clenched his fists again, jaw tight, teeth grinding. "You think you can just walk in here?" he started, but stopped short. There was a glint beneath her jacket, subtle but unmistakable. A badge. No ordinary badge, not a police badge or a local enforcement patch, but one that carried weight, authority, and lethal training. Navy SEAL. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. His anger faltered, replaced by wariness. This wasn't a random civilian encounter. She wasn't just a woman defending herself. She was someone trained for situations he had only dreamed of mastering. Someone who could predict his moves, anticipate his aggression, and neutralize him before he even realized the threat. The bar grew silent. Patrons held their breath, sensing the charged air. Some whispered, "Is she military?" Others murmured, "Is this real?" The tension was palpable, a thick fog of uncertainty and fear. Riley stepped forward slightly, just enough to close the psychological gap, her eyes locked on his. "Leave. Now," she commanded. Her tone wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. The Marine's pride screamed. He had never been commanded by anyone like this, and yet he hesitated. Something in her eyes, a mixture of steel and focus, made him question everything. His hand twitched toward his jacket, then stopped. He realized with a sinking feeling that this woman wasn't bluffing. She could handle anything he threw at her, and possibly more. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm of emotions inside him: anger, humiliation, fear, and a reluctant admiration. Slowly, carefully, he stepped back, releasing the tension in his fists. The bar exhaled collectively, the tension momentarily broken. But even as he did, Riley's gaze never wavered. She observed him like a hawk, noting his every micro-expression, every twitch of emotion, every hidden reaction. She had seen this before. Trained professionals, combat veterans, civilians, they all had tells. She filed them away, a mental record for later. Then, almost casually, she turned and moved through the crowd. Her stride was purposeful, controlled, almost predatory. Patrons instinctively parted, sensing authority and danger in her every step. The Marine's friends whispered among themselves, their voices shaky. Who is she?" The Marine remained frozen, watching her weave through the crowd with ease. His chest heaved, a mixture of adrenaline and disbelief. He had thought he was prepared for everything, had faced danger head-on, but nothing had prepared him for this encounter. A faint click caught his attention, the glint of metal at her hip, the curve of her badge. Navy SEAL. He had heard the stories, read the news, seen the training videos. And now, standing in a dimly lit bar in Jacksonville, he realized the truth. He had just been outmatched by one of the most elite operators in the world. The bar returned to its normal rhythm slowly, conversations picking up, music swelling. But the Marine couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Something about this encounter felt larger than a bar fight. He rubbed his jaw, touching the faint bruise where her grip had left a mark. Pride and fear collided inside him. Outside, the humidity pressed against the walls and Riley disappeared into the night. The Marine watched the door, heart pounding, knowing that this wasn't the end. Whoever she was, and whatever mission she carried, she had left a mark on him, on the bar, on the night itself. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny voice whispered, chilling in its clarity, "This isn't over, not by a long shot." Suspense. Who was Riley Hunter really? How had she anticipated every move? And why did this encounter feel like the beginning of something far bigger than a bar fight? The night outside the Rusty Anchor was heavy with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and seeps into your bones. The streets were nearly deserted, a few stragglers stumbling home from bars and clubs, unaware of the storm that had just erupted in the heart of Jacksonville. Riley Hunter moved with quiet precision, her boots clicking softly against the pavement, each step calculated, each breath measured. She kept to the shadows, blending into the night, but she knew she couldn't linger. Not yet. Back inside the bar, the Marine sat slumped against a stool, rubbing his jaw and trying to steady his racing heart. Anger still simmered beneath the surface, but a new emotion had surfaced, unease. The woman he had confronted wasn't ordinary. Not in any way. Her movements, her precision, the calm, controlled authority in her gaze, it was as if she had anticipated every reaction before it even happened. His fellow Marine hovered nearby, whispering nervously, "Dude, who was that? No one moves like that." The Marine shook his head, voice low and uneven. "I don't know, but we just got outclassed by a woman." The words felt foreign, heavy with humiliation. He had faced worse than street fights in his life, war zones, hand-to-hand combat, life-and-death situations overseas. Yet tonight, in a dingy bar, he had been unprepared, completely unprepared. Meanwhile, Riley ducked into an alley behind the bar, checking her surroundings. She reached into her jacket, confirming the badge she carried was still secure. Navy SEAL. Her cover was intact, but only just. This encounter had been unexpected. The Marine wasn't the target, he was collateral, a pawn in something bigger, but he was dangerous if left unchecked, and she had noticed a detail others would have missed. Across the street, a black SUV idled, engine silent, lights off. Riley's eyes flicked to it, calculating. Surveillance. She wasn't alone in this, someone had been watching the bar, waiting for the right moment. The Marine's brute strength and unpredictable nature could have blown the entire operation. She had to act, and fast. Inside the bar, the Marine finished his drink, glancing around. Patrons had returned to their conversations, but he could feel the lingering tension. Whispers of the mysterious woman traveled like wildfire. Was she military? A cop? Some kind of agent? He didn't know, and part of him didn't want to. A nurse on shift at the nearby hospital, unaware of the bar incident, was tidying up the triage desk when she received a text alert. A familiar pattern caught her eye, a small detail in a file she had been reviewing for hours. Something didn't add up. She paused, reading the Marine's name and recent history. His records were clean, or at least officially. But the tattoo on his wrist, the emblem barely visible beneath the sleeve of his shirt, triggered a memory. A symbol associated with an elite unit, one that had been involved in clandestine operations overseas. Some of those operations had gone off the radar in ways that suggested more than just military discipline. Her pulse quickened. She didn't know this Marine personally, yet her instincts screamed danger. This wasn't random. Someone with his training combined with his current mental state could be unpredictable. If left unchecked, the consequences could be catastrophic. Back in Jacksonville, Riley's movements were precise as she approached the edge of the city, scanning every street corner, every alleyway, for potential threats. She was aware the Marine could trace her path if he had the inclination, and she had to ensure no one else got hurt. The badge under her jacket weighed heavily on her chest, not physically, but as a reminder of the responsibility she carried. The Marine, still nursing his pride, finally left the bar. The warm night air hit him like a slap. He could feel eyes on him. He glanced around, paranoia creeping in. Was someone following him? Was this the same woman from the bar? A chill ran down his spine. Riley had already vanished into the darkness, leaving only questions behind. She knew the Marine would remember her, not just her skill, but the feeling she left in the room. Calm, controlled, lethal. He didn't know why she had intervened, didn't know she had been protecting him from something larger, but he would find out soon enough. Back in the hospital, the nurse pulled up the Marine's medical and service records, cross-referencing tattoos, deployment history, and recent assignments. Something was off. A pattern emerged, subtle, hidden in plain sight, but unmistakable to someone trained to see the gaps. The Marine wasn't just another soldier. His presence, combined with certain operations overseas, suggested he had unknowingly come into possession of sensitive information that could destabilize operations if mishandled. The nurse's hands hovered over the phone. Calling it in could change everything, not just for him but for others who might unknowingly be in danger. She had to move carefully. One wrong step in the Marine's life, and potentially many others, could be at risk. Meanwhile, the Marine walked alone through the quiet streets, tension coiled in every muscle. His mind replayed the encounter, analyzing every movement, every word, every glance. Who was she? Why had she shown up tonight? Was it random chance, or had he walked straight into something much bigger than he realized? A shadow flickered across the street ahead, subtle but deliberate. The Marine froze. Adrenaline surged. His hand twitched near his side, instincts honed over years of training kicking in. Something was out of place. His heartbeat quickened. And then he saw it, a glint of metal under the faint streetlight. Not a weapon, something else. A badge. No, it was too small, too precise. A mark of authority, the kind that made trained soldiers hesitate. His stomach tightened. Somewhere, Riley Hunter observed him from a distance, noting every reaction. She had given him a warning, a choice to retreat, to disengage. But the situation was evolving faster than anyone could predict. She had to prepare for what was coming next, because the Marine wasn't the only one involved. Others had taken notice. The streets of Jacksonville seemed quieter now, but the tension was palpable. The Marine sensed it, the invisible threat of danger, the feeling that tonight's encounter was just the beginning. He had no idea what lay ahead, only that the woman in the bar had changed everything. And somewhere in the darkness, a whisper of anticipation lingered. Riley Hunter knew the Marine would soon realize the truth. He was no longer just a soldier in a bar fight. He had stumbled into a world of secrets, operations, and dangers far beyond his understanding. And she was the only one standing between him and disaster. Suspense. The Marine thought it was over, but the nurse had noticed a critical detail, and Riley's presence hinted at a larger game in motion. What had she seen, and how much danger was still lurking in the shadows? The fluorescent lights of the Jacksonville General Hospital cast a harsh glare over the sterile corridors, making the white walls feel almost blinding. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and worry. In room 312, the Marine sat propped against the crisp hospital sheets, one arm bandaged from the bruises the bar fight had left behind. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a simmering mix of embarrassment, curiosity, and unease. He was used to taking control of every situation, but tonight, control had been ripped from him by a woman whose presence he still couldn't fully comprehend. A nurse stepped into the room, clipboard in hand, her white uniform pristine, hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes flicked to the Marine with a practiced calm, scanning him as if reading more than just his vitals. She had that rare ability to see beneath the surface, to notice the details most people missed. "You're lucky," she said softly, almost gently. "This could have gone much worse." The Marine glanced up, his blue eyes narrowed. "Too late," he muttered, a bitter edge in his voice. He was frustrated, not just with the fight but with himself. Pride was a stubborn thing to swallow, and tonight it had been humiliated. The nurse didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled a chair close, sitting just outside his reach, and studied the chart in her hands. Something in her expression shifted subtly, a flicker of recognition, of calculation. She had seen the Marine's record, the tattoos, the deployment history. Something didn't add up. His hospital bracelet caught her eye, and she lifted the cuff slightly to examine the faded tattoo on his wrist, partially visible beneath his sleeve. The symbol, a small, intricate emblem, was one she knew well. It was associated with an elite military unit, one that had operated in sensitive, high-stakes missions overseas. A unit whose members sometimes returned with secrets that the world could never know. Her pulse quickened. The Marine wasn't just a soldier off duty. He carried connections, knowledge, and possibly danger that went far beyond the bar incident. If she didn't act, if she didn't notice the detail she had spotted, the consequences could be severe. The Marine watched her quietly, confusion flickering across his bruised features. What are you looking at?" he asked, voice low, cautious. She glanced at him, her eyes sharp, precise. "Your wrist," she said simply, "and your file. There's something here, something important, something that hasn't been addressed." The Marine's brows furrowed. "Important? It's just a tattoo and some deployment records. What's the big deal?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not the tattoo, it's what it represents. And combined with other details I've been tracking, it tells a story that shouldn't be ignored. People could be in danger, including you." His chest tightened. Danger, him. He had survived firefights, missions that had shredded entire villages and left him questioning humanity, and yet this stranger's words made him uneasy. Something about the calm authority in her tone told him she wasn't exaggerating. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, quickly scanning it across the Marine's records. "This pattern I'm seeing," she muttered under her breath, "it doesn't match the official reports. Someone has overlooked something, or worse, someone wants it hidden." The Marine's pulse accelerated. He tried to sit up straighter, his instincts flaring. "You're saying someone's messing with my history?" The nurse shook her head slightly. "Not just your history, it's bigger than that. Operations overseas, certain incidents, the details don't align. There's a thread, subtle, almost invisible, that connects several events, and it points to you. Unknowingly, yes, but it points to you." The Marine's eyes widened. He had always known that war left shadows, that secrets were part of the territory, but never had he imagined that a bar fight, and a woman who could neutralize him in seconds, would lead to this. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You need to trust me. I can help you sort this out, but you need to follow my lead. One wrong step and the consequences, well, let's just say they could be deadly." He hesitated, a storm of pride, fear, and curiosity battling inside him. Trusting a stranger. That went against every instinct he had honed over years in combat. And yet, there was something about her, the calm precision, the confidence, the aura of control, that demanded it. Before he could respond, a soft buzz from her headset caught her attention. She glanced at it quickly, then back at him. "You're not alone in this," she said. "There are others who have noticed too, but they don't see it the way I do." The Marine's head swiveled, suddenly aware of the weight of the moment. His instincts screamed that he had walked into something far more complex than a bar fight or bruised pride. He had stumbled into a web of secrets, surveillance, and danger. And Riley Hunter, the woman he had faced tonight, was at the center of it all, orchestrating from the shadows. The nurse stood, taking a step closer. "The detail I noticed tonight in your records, it changes everything. You were almost targeted unknowingly. And that woman, Riley Hunter, she was protecting you. I don't know how much you understand yet, but she's the only reason you're alive right now." The Marine swallowed hard. His chest tightened. Rage, confusion, and a dawning realization mingled in a heavy swirl. "Alive," he echoed, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said firmly. "And if she hadn't been there, it could have gone very differently. You've survived battles before, but tonight, you survived because someone saw what others didn't." The Marine leaned back against the pillow, mind racing. Questions collided. Who was Riley Hunter, really? Why had she been in that bar? What had the nurse seen in his records that no one else had noticed? And how deep did this danger go? Was it just local or something international, something tied to the missions he had barely survived? The hospital lights flickered faintly, as if echoing the tension in the room. Outside, the city's hum was distant, muted by the walls that separated life from chaos. The Marine's jaw clenched. He had always prided himself on control, on reading situations, on surviving. And yet, in this moment, he realized he had been blind, completely blind. The nurse glanced at the clock. "I need to alert others," she said, urgency threading through her calm demeanor. "But not here, not until you're ready. You're involved now, whether you like it or not. And Riley, she's already steps ahead. You need to understand the role you play before it's too late." The Marine exhaled slowly, muscles still taut with adrenaline and unease. He had survived firefights, ambushes, and missions where death was always a heartbeat away. But nothing in his past had prepared him for this. A quiet, calculated woman in a bar, a nurse who saw more than anyone should, and a truth that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the night continued. Riley Hunter was already moving, calculating, preparing for the next step. And the Marine, once confident, unshakable, in control, was beginning to understand that he was no longer the hunter. He was part of something much bigger. Suspense. The Marine is alive, but the nurse's discovery has revealed a hidden danger, and Riley's actions hint at a much larger operation at play. How much is he truly in over his head, and what comes next could change everything? The Marine lay back against the crisp hospital sheets, the bruises on his arm still throbbing, the taste of iron lingering in his mouth from the bar fight. His pride burned hotter than the Florida heat outside, but beneath it was a growing unease he couldn't shake. Something about tonight had shifted the balance. He had faced danger before, stared down bullets, explosions, and enemies with intent to kill, but nothing had left him this unsettled. The nurse, calm and precise, moved to the end of his bed, her hands gloved as she reviewed his chart once more. Her eyes lingered on the subtle details that others had missed, the faded tattoo on his wrist, partially hidden beneath the sleeve of his t-shirt, and the emblem etched there, an insignia associated with a covert operations unit, one she had tracked closely over the years. She frowned, her mind connecting dots faster than any computer. The Marine's deployments, the unusual gaps in his service record, the pattern of incidents overseas, all pointed to something bigger. Her instincts screamed at her that this was more than coincidence. And the tattoo, it was the key. "This symbol," she said quietly, leaning closer, "it's not just a mark of service. It indicates affiliation with missions that were irregular, unofficial. Some reports call them black ops." She paused, watching his reaction. His eyes narrowed, jaw tightening, but he said nothing. She continued, voice low, urgent. "Combined with other anomalies in your records, missing reports, unreported incidents, and personnel movements, it suggests someone is trying to hide something, and you're at the center of it, knowingly or not." The Marine's pulse quickened. He rubbed his forehead, frustration and confusion twisting together. "You're saying I'm involved in something illegal?" he asked, voice low, cautious. "Not necessarily," she replied. "But you have information, knowledge, or access that certain people want. And the woman from the bar, Riley Hunter, she saw it too. She acted tonight to protect you. That's why she was there." The Marine's mind raced. The bar fight, the precision, the control, everything suddenly aligned. Riley wasn't just skilled. She had seen something critical in him, something that made him a potential target. But he still didn't understand why. The nurse glanced at her computer screen, pulling up a series of deployment logs, medical records, and personnel files. Her finger hovered over one document, a mission report that had been quietly archived, its details scrubbed from public records. She leaned closer, showing it to the Marine. "This," she said, tapping the screen, is the link. This mission report shows movements, operations, and decisions that weren't officially recorded. You were present during part of it, and even unknowingly, you carry details that could expose dangerous operations. People have noticed patterns in your file, patterns that only someone trained to see subtle connections would spot. The Marine stared, swallowing hard. The tattoo on his wrist, the bruises, the bar fight, it all converged in a way that left him reeling. "So, all of this was because of me?" he asked, disbelief creeping into his tone. "Yes," the nurse said firmly, "but not in the way you think. You weren't a target because of who you are, but because of what you've been involved with. And tonight, Riley Hunter made sure nothing happened to you. She noticed the threat, she acted, and she neutralized it before it escalated." A cold realization settled over the Marine. The bar fight had never been about pride, about ego, or even anger. It had been a test, an intervention, a shield against a threat he didn't fully understand. And now, for the first time, he understood that someone had been watching him, studying him, calculating how to intervene without alerting the wrong people. The nurse pulled a file from her pocket, flipping it open to reveal a series of annotations and symbols that would mean nothing to an ordinary person. But for someone trained in military operations, they spoke volumes. Locations, dates, mission overlaps, personnel movements. It was a map of hidden connections, hidden patterns. "You see this," she said. "It's subtle, but it's a trail. It's a breadcrumb path that leads to something bigger, something dangerous. And Riley, she's following it." The Marine's stomach tightened. He had survived firefights, ambushes, and chaotic missions where death was a heartbeat away. But nothing had prepared him for this. The realization that his life, his decisions, and even his mere presence were part of a larger, unseen web. She leaned closer, lowering her voice even further. "You need to pay attention to the details. Someone who notices patterns, someone who can read subtle cues could save lives. That's what I did tonight. That's what Riley did. And now it's time for you to understand the stakes." The Marine exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Pride and fear collided inside him, rage at being outmaneuvered, awe at the skill of the woman who had stopped him, and now a growing sense of responsibility. "You're saying I have to follow her lead?" he asked, voice tight. "Yes," the nurse said, her eyes locking with his. "She knows the path, the threats, the dangers. You follow her instructions and you survive. You hesitate, you question too much, and things could go wrong very fast. Do you understand?" He nodded slowly, digesting the enormity of the situation. He had always been trained to lead, to make decisions, to take control. But tonight, survival meant trust. Trust in a stranger. Trust in a woman whose skills and judgment had just saved his life. Outside, Jacksonville's streets were quiet, but Riley Hunter moved with purpose, scanning every alleyway, every street corner, every potential vantage point. She had seen the Marine tonight, noticed the subtle danger he carried, and acted. Now, the trail she had started following, the one connected to the Marine's past and present, was growing more complicated. Someone was watching, waiting, calculating. Back in the hospital, the nurse glanced at her computer one last time, verifying the sequence of events and the pattern she had traced. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "This is the connection no one else saw." The Marine shifted in his bed, muscles still tense, eyes scanning the sterile room as if threats could appear from the walls themselves. The adrenaline from the bar fight was long gone, replaced by a cold, gnawing awareness. His life had shifted. The fight had been a warning, a shield, and a wake-up call. And now, armed with the nurse's discovery and Riley Hunter's intervention, he had a chance to survive what was coming next. Suspense. The Marine now knows the stakes. He's part of a larger hidden operation, and the nurse's clue reveals a dangerous web of connections. But Riley Hunter is already moving ahead, and the real threat is still unseen. What awaits him next could change everything. The fluorescent hospital lights hummed like a warning signal, casting cold, sterile reflections across the Marine's bruised face. Every sound, The beeping of monitors, the rustle of nurses' shoes, the distant echo of ambulance sirens was amplified in his heightened state of awareness. His training had taught him to anticipate danger, to read threats, to react before an enemy struck. But tonight he felt blind. He had been outmaneuvered by a woman in a bar, and now the nurse's discovery suggested the threat wasn't over. Riley Hunter was already in motion miles away, blending into the city like a shadow, tracking the threads of a hidden operation that most would never even know existed. The Marine, for the first time, felt like prey, not predator. His hand twitched near his side out of habit, ready for a fight that might never come, but instinct told him it was coming. The nurse stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. Her gaze was firm, unwavering, but carried a quiet urgency. "They know you've been noticed," she said. "Your bar fight wasn't random. Someone's watching, waiting, seeing what you're capable of. You're involved now. There's no turning back." The Marine swallowed hard. Pride, frustration, and fear collided inside him. He had faced ambushes overseas, run missions where every decision was a matter of life and death. But nothing had prepared him for the idea that his life could be imperiled by shadows in his own city, by people who had been planning while he slept, ate, and fought unknowingly. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, soft but deliberate. The Marine tensed, muscles coiled. The nurse's eyes flicked to the door. "They're here," she whispered. A group of officers entered, their movements coordinated but cautious. They carried an authority that was unmistakable, federal law enforcement, likely military intelligence, judging by the demeanor. The Marine's heart raced as they approached, and instinctively he raised his hand slightly, cautious. The lead officer, a tall man with a sharp gaze, stepped forward. "Sergeant Thompson?" he asked, voice low but commanding. The Marine nodded, unsure where this was heading. "We've been following your record," the officer continued. "Your recent activities, your deployments, certain anomalies. We need to speak with you, discreetly." His tone suggested danger but also opportunity. The nurse leaned closer to the Marine, whispering urgently, "This is part of what I found. These are the people Riley anticipated. Trust her, trust me. Follow instructions carefully. One wrong move and this goes sideways fast." The Marine exhaled sharply, nodding slowly. His pride bristled at the idea of being escorted, questioned, controlled, but he knew better than to resist. Not tonight. Not when every instinct screamed that misjudging the situation could cost lives. Outside, Riley Hunter surveyed the streets. Her eyes were trained on the periphery, scanning for threats, watching movements, reading the patterns of traffic, pedestrians, and hidden observers. She had seen the Marine tonight, recognized his potential danger, and acted without hesitation. But she also knew that once he was engaged with authorities, the next stage would be critical. She needed him aware, cooperative, yet alert to threats no one else could see. Back in the hospital room, the Marine was escorted to a private vehicle, dark and unmarked. The nurse followed, riding alongside him, monitoring his condition and his reactions. The car moved silently through the city streets, tension coiling like a snake in the air. Inside, the Marine's mind raced. He thought about the bar, about Riley, about the nurse's revelations. Everything was connected: the tattoo, the deployments, the anomalies in his record. He understood now that the woman in the bar had been protecting him, guiding him away from threats he hadn't even recognized. The nurse handed him a small tablet displaying the same file she had examined earlier. "Look," she said, "this is the thread. These are the connections. Riley has already moved to intercept. Your role now is simple: stay alert, follow instructions, and survive." The Marine studied the tablet. Lines of deployment data, personnel assignments, and mission reports interwove in a pattern only someone trained in military analysis could follow. His jaw tightened. He had survived firefights, explosive encounters, and ambushes, but understanding this web of hidden operations required a different kind of vigilance. Suddenly, the car jolted, tires squealing as it swerved sharply. The Marine's hand went to his side, anticipating an attack. Outside, a black SUV had appeared, shadowing them with silent precision. Riley Hunter's voice came through a secure channel in the Marine's earpiece. "Stay calm, they've noticed you. Engage only if necessary. Follow my lead." The Marine's pulse spiked. He had been trained for ambushes, for combat, for tactical operations, but never for an unseen enemy manipulating events from multiple directions. The SUV tailed them, relentless. The nurse's hand gripped his arm. "Trust her. Move only when she says. This is what she does, anticipates danger before it strikes." Minutes stretched into tense eternity as the vehicle weaved through backstreets and alleyways. The SUV persisted, maneuvering with precision. The Marine's instincts flared. He could feel danger closing in, the scent of threat almost tangible. Then Riley's voice came again, sharp, clear. "Now." The driver of their vehicle accelerated, taking a sharp turn down a narrow side street. The SUV followed, but Riley had calculated the choke point. Within seconds, the trailing vehicle was forced into a narrow cul-de-sac, its path blocked. The Marine exhaled sharply, tension releasing slightly, but only slightly. He now understood that Riley was orchestrating every move, guiding him, shielding him, predicting every step before it happened. As the SUV backed away, authorities moved in, surrounding the vehicle. The Marine realized he was witnessing precision at a level he had never imagined, trained, lethal, and almost surgical. Riley Hunter had engineered the entire intervention without ever exposing herself, without unnecessary confrontation. The nurse's eyes met his. "This is only the beginning," she said quietly. "The threads are larger than you know, but you're still alive because someone noticed the details others missed." The Marine's chest tightened. Rage, relief, and awe mingled in equal measure. The encounter at the bar, the nurse's discovery, and Riley's intervention were not random. They were the opening moves in a game he barely understood. And somewhere, just beyond the city streets, hidden and silent, the larger operation that had drawn him into this dangerous web was already in motion, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suspense. The Marine has survived the initial confrontation, but the hidden enemy is still out there, watching, calculating, and ready to exploit every mistake. Trusting Riley and the nurse is his only chance, but can he act fast enough to survive the coming storm? The streets of Jacksonville were deceptively quiet, the night air thick with humidity and tension. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, swallowed by the urban sprawl. The Marine sat tensely in the unmarked vehicle, muscles coiled like springs. His instincts screamed danger. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. He had faced ambushes overseas, but nothing compared to the unseen enemy now hunting him through his own city. Riley Hunter's voice came through the earpiece, calm, controlled, and precise. "They've identified your location. You need to move. Follow my instructions exactly. One mistake and it's over." The Marine's pulse spiked. He gripped the edge of the seat, scanning the streets. He could feel eyes on him, unseen, calculating, measuring every move. The SUV from earlier had vanished temporarily, but he knew it wasn't gone. The predator had merely shifted position, waiting for the right moment to strike. The nurse beside him, hands steady on the console, spoke quietly. "Trust her. She's not just watching, you're part of a pattern now. If you break it, they'll act." The vehicle accelerated sharply, tires squealing against asphalt as they turned down a narrow side street. A flash of movement in a rearview mirror confirmed the enemy was still tailing them, relentless. The Marine's muscles tensed, training and adrenaline blending. His mind raced, cataloging every exit, every alleyway, every potential trap. "Left here," Riley instructed, her voice sharp. "Then immediately onto the overpass. Keep speed steady, don't give them an opening." The Marine obeyed, and the vehicle responded like an extension of his will, weaving through the streets with precision. Above, a dimly lit overpass loomed. They took the ramp, and the SUV followed, gaining slightly. Now, Riley's command pierced his earpiece. The vehicle swerved to the right, taking a side alley barely wide enough for one car. The SUV followed, but Riley had calculated the choke point. Garbage bins, construction materials, and parked trucks forced the trailing vehicle to slow. The Marine's heart pounded. He could almost feel Riley's presence orchestrating every move from somewhere ahead, unseen but omnipotent. "They're slowing," the nurse murmured, her fingers tracing a series of commands on the dashboard. "You've got an opening. Stay focused." The Marine nodded, his mind analyzing, calculating. His training kicked in, reading threats, predicting movements, adjusting speed, anticipating every reaction from the unseen enemy. The alley narrowed further, forcing the SUV into a cornered path. Within moments, the enemy's options vanished. They were trapped. Riley's voice came again, calm but deadly serious. "Exit left. There's a secure point ahead. You're safe temporarily." The vehicle obeyed, slipping through a hidden gate, into a narrow compound Riley had prepped in advance. Security cameras, sensors, and physical barriers ensured that no one could follow unnoticed. The SUV's engine revved in the distance, but the barriers delayed pursuit. The Marine exhaled sharply, muscles uncoiling for the first time in hours. Relief mingled with a deep, gnawing unease. They weren't out of danger, far from it, but Riley's foresight had bought him a reprieve. The nurse glanced at him, concern etched on her face. "This isn't over. They're watching. They're calculating. Every move you make will be monitored. You need to understand the bigger picture, what you're part of before the next phase begins." The Marine rubbed his bruised jaw, recalling the bar fight, the precision, the calm authority of Riley Hunter. Everything fit together now: the intervention, the detail she noticed, the warning she orchestrated through the chase. She had been several steps ahead from the beginning, protecting him without his awareness. Riley's voice returned, calm and authoritative. "You need to listen carefully. What you've seen tonight is only the tip of the iceberg. The pattern in your history, the anomalies in your records, the surveillance you've experienced, it all points to a network. They're coordinating to exploit information only someone with your background can provide." The Marine's pulse quickened. "So what, I'm bait?" he asked, his voice tense. "Am I just a target?" "No," Riley replied immediately. "You're a pivot. You carry insight they can't replicate, and you have the ability to act. That's why I intervened. That's why I've guided you through tonight. You make the right choices, you survive, and you have a chance to dismantle the threat. You hesitate, make the wrong move, and they win." Outside, the black SUV lingered in the distance, headlights dim but its intent unmistakable. Riley's calculations had anticipated its position perfectly. The Marine realized for the first time the scope of what he was facing. These weren't ordinary pursuers. They were trained, coordinated, and patient. The nurse handed him a small, secure tablet. "This is what I found in your files. Look carefully. Notice the pattern." The Marine studied it. Mission reports, deployment logs, personnel movements, all interwoven with subtle anomalies. The trail Riley had followed, the warning at the bar, the chase, everything pointed to a coordinated operation, an invisible hand orchestrating events. Suddenly, a soft chime on the tablet drew their attention. A new message flashed on screen. "Next move in 30 minutes. Failure not tolerated." The Marine's jaw tightened. This was bigger than he had imagined. The bar fight had been the spark. The chase had been the escalation. Now the real danger was looming, measured in minutes. Riley's voice came once more, calm and precise. "You will need to act fast. Observe everything, anticipate, and trust no one outside this circle. I will guide you, but mistakes will cost lives." The Marine nodded, tension radiating through his body. Every instinct screamed danger. Every calculation pointed to the enemy's patience and precision. The nurse glanced at him, steady and unwavering, but her eyes mirrored the urgency of the situation. And in the distance, beyond the city lights and surveillance cameras, the enemy moved like shadows across the streets, preparing for the next phase of their plan. They had observed every step, counted every second, and would act without warning. The Marine exhaled, steel settling in his eyes. The bar fight had been the beginning. The chase had been a warning. Now the real test was coming, and Riley Hunter had given him the tools, the guidance, and the window to survive. But time was ticking, and failure was not an option. Suspense. The Marine has survived the chase, but the enemy is closing in, timing everything precisely. Riley Hunter has orchestrated a temporary safe zone, but the next phase of the operation will test every skill, instinct, and decision he has. Can he act fast enough to stay alive and uncover the truth? The night air pressed against the city like a living thing, heavy and thick with the unspoken tension of surveillance, shadows, and secrets. Inside the secured compound, the Marine leaned over the tablet the nurse had given him, analyzing the interwoven patterns of deployments, missions, and anomalies. Every detail pointed toward a calculated design, a hidden network operating beyond official channels. Riley Hunter had guided him this far, and now the stakes were clearer than ever. One mistake, one misstep, and lives, including his own, would be lost. The nurse stood nearby, calm but watchful. "You're ready," she said softly. "Riley has positioned herself. The final phase is about to begin. You follow her instructions to the letter. She's the only one who can navigate you through what comes next." The Marine swallowed hard, the adrenaline still thrumming in his veins. Pride, fear, and respect warred inside him. He had faced ambushes, firefights, and chaotic missions, but tonight was different. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was a pawn in a larger hidden game, where information, loyalty, and timing were far more lethal than bullets. Then the tablet buzzed again. Riley's voice came through, crisp and commanding. "You need to move. Now, exit through the north gate and follow the alleyways. They're converging on your position. Time is critical." The Marine sprang into action, muscles remembering old training while his mind raced with new information. Every movement, every glance, every instinct had to be precise. The nurse guided him silently, ensuring he remained on track. Outside, the city slept unaware of the storm unfolding in its shadows. As they moved, the Marine began to understand the full scope of the operation. The anomalies in his records, the missing reports, unexplained transfers, and operational gaps weren't mistakes. They were breadcrumbs leading to a covert network exploiting sensitive information. Someone wanted access to knowledge only he could provide, and the bar fight had been their first calculated strike, Riley's intervention their first shield. The night air grew sharper as they reached a narrow alley. The Marine felt the tension coil inside him like a spring. Every shadow could conceal an ambush, every sound a threat. Then, ahead, he saw movement. A group of operatives, black-clad, coordinated, closing in with calculated precision. "Stay calm," Riley's voice instructed. "Engage only if necessary. Your role is observation, calculation, and timing. Do not underestimate them." The Marine's hands flexed, instinct and training ready. He observed the operatives' patterns, their coordination, their packing, their blind spots. This wasn't just a random assault. It was a tactical approach, designed to corral, intimidate, and isolate. Suddenly, a flash of motion caught his attention. One operative broke formation, signaling with a hand gesture. The Marine realized they were using a decoy tactic to separate him from the nurse and compound. His pulse raced. One wrong move, and the enemy could exploit it. Riley's voice returned, guiding him with surgical precision. "Move left. Avoid the line of sight. The decoy is secondary. Focus on the central operative. Follow my directions exactly." Adrenaline surged. The Marine ducked behind a dumpster, observing the enemy. He realized that the patterns in his file, the nurse's discovery, and Riley's actions all converged here. The Marine wasn't just surviving. He was part of a test, a crucible designed to separate the capable from the reckless. The operatives advanced, their movements predictable to someone trained like Riley, and now to the Marine, who mirrored her anticipatory mindset. He darted along shadows, avoided exposure, and positioned himself to intercept the decoy without alerting the central operative. Now, Riley's command snapped through the earpiece. The Marines struck, subduing the decoy with a swift, precise maneuver, leveraging their own momentum. The other operatives paused, recalculating, and that hesitation gave him the window to move toward the central figure. He recognized the leader from his files, a shadowy operator who had manipulated the network from the inside. The Marines' focus sharpened. One coordinated move, one decisive strike, and the threat could be neutralized. He advanced silently, closing the distance, muscles coiled, heart steady but pounding. The leader's attention was split between tracking him and managing the others, a fatal mistake. With a precise maneuver, the Marine incapacitated the operative, using a combination of leverage and speed that reflected both his battlefield experience and Riley's prior guidance. The remaining operatives faltered, confused by the sudden turn of events. Riley's voice cut through the tension. "Secure the leader, evacuate quickly. Extraction point is 2 blocks north." The Marine followed the instructions, securing the operative while keeping aware of every movement around him. The city's shadows became their ally, the night their cover, as Riley directed them through a labyrinth of alleyways to safety. Once at the extraction point, the nurse approached, her calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos. "You did it," she said, eyes assessing him for any signs of injury. "You followed instructions. You survived. But more importantly, you understood the pattern, the connections, the danger. That's why you're alive." The Marine exhaled, relief and disbelief mixing. He had been hunted, tested, and guided through layers of unseen threats and had survived. But the revelations weren't over. Riley emerged from the shadows, a silhouette against the dim city lights. She approached, her expression calm, controlled, and almost impossible to read. She removed her hood, revealing eyes that had seen far too much, a presence that had dominated every encounter tonight. "You've done well," she said, "but this isn't over. The network is larger than tonight. You were a test, a catalyst, but now you're aware. And awareness is dangerous to them and to you if misused." The Marine's jaw tightened. "So why me?" he asked, voice hoarse but steady. "Why all this? The bar, the chase, the threats?" Riley's gaze held his. "Because you were marked by circumstance, not choice. But you have skills, instincts, and judgment that matter. I acted to ensure survival, to create a chance for you to understand the truth. That's rare." The nurse stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "And now the next phase begins. You have a choice. Retreat into ignorance or step fully into the reality you've been shielded from. Riley and I can guide you, but only if you commit to the truth." The Marine looked at the two women, the nurse, calm and precise, and Riley, lethal and commanding. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to escape, to forget the night and its revelations. But every calculation, every moment of training, every pattern he had noticed in his file screamed the opposite. This was bigger than pride, ego, or fear. He exhaled a long, steady breath and made his choice. "I'm in," he said firmly. "I follow, I learn, I act." Riley nodded once, faint but approving. The nurse smiled subtly. "Good. Then the real work begins. And remember, tonight was only the beginning." The city remained quiet, unaware of the deadly orchestration that had just taken place within its streets. But for the Marine, for Riley, and for the nurse, the night was alive with revelation, tension, and a fragile but critical alliance. And somewhere, beyond the lights and shadows, the network that had orchestrated the threats waited, unaware that the Marine had survived, that Riley's intervention had succeeded, and that the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. Suspense and resolution. The Marine has survived the bar fight, the chase, and the operative's ambush, thanks to Riley's skill and the nurse's discovery. He now understands the hidden network, the dangers involved, and his role in stopping it. The story concludes with a sense of triumph. revelation, and the knowledge that the true battle, exposing the conspiracy, is just beginning.